Hello, my name is Danish Ibrahim and I will be going over the preliminary results with you of this study. The purpose of this study is to go over the two data sets that were given to us, the beers and the breweries data, and to determine if there's any trends we can see, specifically with the alcohol by volume and the International Bitterness Unit, and its relationship between the states, as well as the types of beers, such as the IPAs and other ales. Let's first look at the breweries by state. As you can see, Colorado has the most with 47. Rounding out the bottom is West Virginia, South Dakota, North Dakota, and the District of Columbia. There are missing rows here that we need to figure out what to do with. We could omit these rows, namely for IBU and ABV. However, that might be releasing key points of data that we actually could use. Therefore, we should replace them. And we need to figure out what to replace them with. There's two clear choices, either the mean or the median. The mean is a measure of the central tendency of the data. However, it is very much affected by outliers. The median is the measure of the middle of the data. However, it is resistant against outliers. So we first need to determine if there is outliers present. This box plot for both of these values tell us if there are outliers. And you can see, depicted by the red circles, that there are. Therefore, it makes more sense to use the median to replace these values. So we will be replacing these missing values with the state medians of the missing value. This will help us make sure that whenever we look at the data by state, that it won't be as affected by what we replaced it with and give us different answers than we would have normally seen if we had just omitted the data altogether. There is one state that did not have any values for IBU, and that was South Dakota, and those were replaced by the national median of 35. Let's look at the median ABV per state. As you can see, Kentucky and the District of Columbia have the highest with 62.5%, and Utah has the lowest with 4%. This makes sense since Utah has a law that you cannot sell alcohol by volume greater than 5%, and if there is alcohol by volume greater than 5%, it can only be sold at state-controlled liquor stores. Now let's look at the median IBU per state. As you can see, Maine has the highest with 61, and rounding out the bottom is Wisconsin with 19. Looking at the maximum ABV per state, we can see Colorado has the highest with a ABV of 12.8%. That beer was the Lee Hill Series Volume 5 Belgian Style Quadruple Ale, if you're curious. Delaware has the lowest with 5.5%. Looking at the maximum IBU per state, we see Oregon has the highest with 138, and Arkansas has the lowest with 39. South Dakota is actually shown as the lowest on this list, but remember, we replaced it with the national median of 35, and which just so happens to be the lowest out of all of these. So we're going to omit that and say it's actually Arkansas. Now let's look at the summary statistics. We can see here in this frequency plot that the peaks of data shown with the peaks of the lines, of the actual lines, we can see that there are some relationships we can determine from here. With the dotted line you see is the actual mean of IBU and ABV respectively. For IBU, you can see the dotted line is very close to the peak of the data. So this tells us that it's a very symmetrical distribution. For ABV, however, you can see the dotted line is to the right of the peaks. This tells us that even though the frequency is less than the mean of ABV, there are higher ABVs that are causing the mean to be greater than for the data set, which means there are outliers present, strong outliers present for ABV. Now let's look at the relationship between ABV and IBU. This tells us how much of the data we can use for ABV and predict what the IBU would be, and vice versa. Looking at the data set, you can see that there is a relationship, and it is a positive moderate strength relationship. And we can say that there are actually, for 23.9% of the time, we can determine the variation of ABV values by the variation of IBU values according to this model. Now we want to determine if ABV and IBU can be used to determine whether something is an IPA or another type of ale. If you look at the graph here, you can see that for ales, it was very successful with a success rate of 88.1%. For IPAs, it was less so with 67.1%. Combined, the model predicted correctly 80% of the time, which is pretty good, but better for ales than for IPAs. This is probably due to the fact that IPAs are made with varying amounts of hops, malt, and other ingredients, and alcohol by volume, whereas ales are more consistent with their ingredients. Let's look at the medians of these states, but actually on a map of the United States. This helps us determine if there's any sort of patterns we can see amongst all of the states. Yes, we've determined the fact that that Kentucky has the highest ABV, or we've determined the fact that it would be a good place to release a new product. However, if we look at Kentucky on the map, we can see West Virginia is almost just as high in terms of median. So it would be better to release a new product in both states at the same time. They share a border. That's a bigger market we can hit. We don't just have to do it one state at a time. And same thing for IBU. If we look at the map, Florida and Georgia share a border, and they have a higher median than most other states. Instead of only targeting one of the states, it would make sense to target both at the same time, or at least start in Florida and move to Georgia next, to make it at least have a good plan of action in terms of what to do with new products. There are a few takeaways to take away from this whole study. We can see that median is a better judge with this data set because there were outliers present. We also see that ABV and IBU is more consistent with other ales as opposed to IPAs. And if we focus on IBU and ABV trends by state, as well as the trends in adjacent states, we could come up with better business plans that are more efficient and could overall make this company better as a whole. Thank you very much for your time.